There are moments in life so piercing, so cruel, that the human heart struggles to remain whole. Picture this: a wealthy couple, dressed in their finest, sitting in the cold sterility of a Lagos courtroom. The woman's face, lined with 20 years of waiting and silent prayers, trembles with disbelief. Beside her, her husband grips her hand, his knuckles white, as though holding her is the only thing keeping him upright. Across the room, a man points his finger at them. His voice rises, sharp and merciless, echoing off the high walls. "They stole my child. They raised what was mine. For 10 years, they lived off a lie." The judge looks down, the reporters scribble, the cameras click. And in that instant, the rich couple's world, the world they had fought for, built for, prayed for, begins to shatter. Stay with me until the very last second of this story, because what you are about to hear is not fiction. It is a real story from the bustling city of Lagos. A story of love and loss, of betrayal and healing. And in the end, a story that will leave you asking yourself, what truly makes a parent? Before we go back to the beginning, pause for a moment. Subscribe so that you never miss stories like this. Stories that pierce through the heart. Stories that reveal the depths of humanity. Because this one you must watch until the very end. The courtroom was not where it began. The pain had begun long before. For 20 years, a wealthy couple in Lagos lived in abundance, but also in emptiness. Their home in Lekki was a palace, glass walls reflecting the rising sun, expensive cars parked in front, marble floors that echoed with silence. Silence, the cruelest sound for a couple who wanted nothing more than the laughter of a child. Year after year, they tried. Hospitals in Lagos, specialists in Abuja, even flights to London for procedures that cost more than most Nigerians would see in a lifetime. They tried every method science could offer: IVF, fertility drugs, even surrogacy. Each attempt ended in heartbreak. Every December, as families gathered for Christmas, they smiled through the pain, entertaining guests in their lavish home while secretly longing for the patter of small feet, the tug of a tiny hand, the voice that would call them mama and papa. The woman's body bore the scars of countless injections and treatments. The man's face grew heavier, not from age, but from carrying the weight of unanswered prayers. Their wealth brought them everything but the one thing that mattered. Friends whispered. Relatives suggested solutions, sometimes cruel ones. Some said the man should take another wife. Others told the woman to accept her fate. But love bound them together. They would rather endure the world's judgment than betray each other. For 20 years, they carried that cross. It was on a humid night in Lagos that everything changed. They were driving back from a charity gala, the kind of event where champagne flows and camera flashes never stop. The woman, tired of the noise, asked to leave early. Their black SUV rolled down the streets, away from the glitter, into quieter roads. Then they saw it. On the side of the road, under the dim orange glow of a broken street lamp, was a bundle. A sound, faint, desperate, pierced the night. The woman gasped. The driver slowed down. The man stepped out, his polished shoes crunching against gravel. There, on the dusty roadside, lay an infant, wrapped in a dirty cloth, crying softly as though his voice had already grown tired of calling for help. The woman rushed out. She knelt down, her evening gown brushing against the dirt, and lifted the child. His skin was warm, his tiny hands weak but alive. He looked up at her with eyes that seemed to plead, "Do not leave me here." Tears filled her eyes instantly. For 20 years she had waited. And here, on the roadside of Lagos, lay the answer to a prayer she thought heaven had ignored. They took the child home that night. Not as charity, not as an act of pity, but as parents who had just found their son. The next weeks were a storm. Hospitals were visited. Doctors checked the baby. He was underfed, weak, but miraculously healthy. Police reports were filed, though no one came forward to claim him. The couple followed the process of adoption legally, their wealth smoothing the bureaucracy that often traps such cases. Slowly, painfully, but surely, the boy became theirs, not by blood, but by bond. For the first time in 2 decades, their mansion was no longer silent. It rang with the cries of feeding time, the laughter of play, the hurried steps of parents learning parenthood late in life. The woman, though inexperienced, poured every ounce of her heart into nurturing him. The man, though busy with business, found himself sneaking away from boardrooms just to watch his son sleep. The child thrived. He grew strong, tall, and bright-eyed. He was not just a boy, he was their miracle. They named him a name that meant gift. And for 10 years he was the sun that rose every morning in their lives. They were complete. But life has a way of testing joy. Even as they celebrated birthdays, even as they took family vacations to Dubai and London, even as their son excelled in the best schools in Lagos, there was a shadow watching from a distance. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who would wait 10 years before stepping forward to tear apart the family they had built. But that storm was yet to come. For now, in those first 10 years, the couple lived the life they had always dreamed of. Their mansion was no longer silent. Their love, once tested by the cruelty of infertility, was reborn in the laughter of a child they had found on a Lagos roadside. And yet, as we return to that courtroom, as we watch that man point his finger and call them thieves, as we watch the couple fight back tears, remember this. Love is not always safe. Sometimes it is fragile. Sometimes it is attacked. But true love, the kind built on sacrifice, on sleepless nights, on prayers whispered into the dark, that kind of love fights back. In this story, we will see the storm arrive. A man will step into their lives, claiming fatherhood, demanding 50 million naira, demanding custody of the child they raised for 10 years. The courtroom will not only test the law, it will test love itself. Stay until the very end. Because what happens next will shake your soul. The day it happened, Lagos was hot. The city buzzed with its usual chaos, horns blaring, street vendors calling, the scent of roasted corn drifting through the air. But inside the mansion of the wealthy couple, life was calm. A boy, 10 years old, laughed as he ran through the halls. His parents, who had waited 20 years for him, smiled with the quiet joy of people who finally believed they had outrun sorrow. Then the knock came. When the doors opened, it was not joy that entered. It was a storm disguised as a man. He stood tall, with eyes hardened by time and bitterness. And with a voice sharp as broken glass, he declared that the child, the boy who had been their miracle for 10 years, was his son. He accused them of theft. He accused them of building their lives on his blood. And he did not come empty-handed. He came with lawyers, with papers, with a lawsuit that demanded not only custody of the boy, but 50 million Nigerian nairas in damages. And just like that, the joy that had taken decades to build began to tremble. News spreads fast in Lagos, especially when it involves wealth, scandal, and children. The story hit the media like a fire. Headlines screamed, "Wealthy couple accused of stealing child. Biological father demands 50 million Nigerian nairas. Custody battle over boy shocks Lekki community." Neighbors whispered. Relatives who once celebrated with the couple now questioned their story. Strangers on social media judged with sharp tongues, typing accusations from the safety of their screens. The woman who had once been admired for her charity work now became a subject of gossip. The man who had been respected in the business world now found himself painted as a thief. And in the center of it all was a child. A boy too young to understand the venom of adults, but old enough to sense that the world around him was changing. The man who had arrived with fury painted himself as a victim. He said that years ago, he had been robbed of his son. He claimed he had searched endlessly. That fate had finally revealed the truth to him. That his child had been raised in luxury while he suffered in silence. But beneath his story was something darker, something greedier, because his demands were not only for love, not only for the return of his son, but for money. 50 million Nigerian nairas, he said, for the pain he endured. 50 million Nigerian nairas for 10 years of absence. 50 million Nigerian nairas to heal his supposed wounds. Was it justice? Or was it exploitation? The couple knew in their hearts that he was not a grieving father. He was an opportunist. A man who had seen the life they built, the success they carried, the love they shared, and decided it was his turn to take. Inside their home, the couple crumbled. For 10 years they had lived in peace. They had watched their son grow. They had healed from decades of barrenness. But now all of it seemed fragile. The woman wept silently in her room, afraid that her son would be taken away. Afraid that after all the scars on her body, all the prayers whispered in the night, she would lose the only thing that had ever made her feel whole. The man, though strong in appearance, broke inside. He had built empires, conquered businesses, survived betrayals in boardrooms, but he did not know how to fight this. Because this was not about money or power. This was about love. They held each other in the night, promising that no matter what, they would fight until the end. But in their hearts, fear sat like a shadow. The case moved quickly. In Lagos, money can sometimes slow things down. But when stories capture the public's attention, courts move with speed. The man's lawyers were aggressive. They presented his case as clear: a father wronged, a child stolen, a rich couple who thought they could bury the truth with wealth. The couple's lawyers were careful, deliberate. They argued that the child had been abandoned, that the couple had followed the law, that they had adopted him through the right channels. But in court, truth is not always enough. Evidence speaks louder. And the man demanded DNA. The judge ordered it. And suddenly, everything hung on science. The boy was taken for examination. Needles pierced his skin, samples were collected. The man gave his blood. The couple watched in silence, their hearts trembling. For days, Lagos held its breath. Newspapers speculated. TV stations ran endless debates. Social media burned with arguments. Some said the couple had stolen the child, using money to cover their tracks. Others defended them, calling the man a fraud chasing wealth. But in the middle of it all was a boy. A 10-year-old child caught between blood and love. At school, whispers followed him. Other children asked questions. Teachers looked at him with pity. He began to feel like he was living in a story that was no longer his own. At night, he asked his mother why people were saying he did not belong. And though she tried to reassure him, her tears betrayed her. The boy began to fear sleep. Because in his dreams, he saw himself standing between two houses, two families, two lives, and he did not know which one was truly his. The results of the DNA test had not yet been revealed. The courtroom had not yet made its judgment. But the couple knew one thing. Their world was unraveling. Love had carried them through 20 years of barrenness. Love had given them the courage to raise a child found on the roadside. But now, love was being tested in the harshest court of all, the court of blood. The truth will emerge. DNA will speak. And what it reveals will shake not only the couple, not only the man, but everyone who has followed this painful story. Because sometimes, the cruelest truth is not that blood matters, but that love may not be enough to silence it. Stay with me until the very end. Because what happens next will break your heart, and then slowly begin to heal it. There are truths that heal, and there are truths that wound. The courtroom in Lagos was heavy with silence when the envelope was opened. The paper inside was small, clinical, free of emotion. But the words it carried were sharp enough to cut through 10 years of love. The DNA test was conclusive. The man was, indeed, the biological father of the boy. Gasps filled the room. Reporters rushed to scribble. The man smiled, his chest rising with triumph. And in the corner, the wealthy couple who had raised the child for a decade sat frozen, as though a knife had been thrust into their souls. For them, it was not just science. It was betrayal by fate. After 20 years of barrenness, after 10 years of parenting, after sleepless nights and whispered prayers, a stranger now had the weight of blood on his side. But blood is not the same as love. And this story was not over. The man's lawyers pounced. With the DNA results, their argument grew sharper. This boy belongs to his biological father. No paper, no adoption, no wealth can erase the truth of blood. The couple's lawyers fought back. They argued that the man had abandoned the child. That for 10 years he had been absent. That he had no right to suddenly appear, demanding both money and custody. The judge listened. The court watched. And Lagos buzzed with speculation. But one truth remained: the law leaned toward blood. And the couple knew that if they were to keep their son, they would need more than legal papers. They would need the truth of love to shine through. Outside the courtroom, the couple broke. The woman retreated into silence. She replayed the memory of the night they found the child on the roadside, the tiny bundle under a broken street lamp. She remembered the way his eyes had looked at her, not as a stranger, but as though he had always belonged. The man, though stronger in appearance, carried his pain in silence. He watched his wife weep and knew there were no words strong enough to heal her. For him, the battle was not just against the man. It was against time, against society, against a truth they could not undo. Still, they resolved one thing. They would not let him go without a fight. For 10 years, the boy had known only one father and one mother. Their arms had carried him, their voices had sung to him, their sacrifices had shaped his life. But now, he was told that another man was his father. A stranger with the same blood, but not the same love. Psychologists were brought in to hear his thoughts. And though he was only a child, his words carried a weight no adult could ignore. He spoke of the warmth of his home, the love of his parents, the memories of birthdays and school events. He spoke of belonging, not to a name or to blood, but to a family who had never left his side. And slowly, the courtroom began to see that this was not a case of theft, but of love. The man's story, once polished, began to crack. Questions arose. If he was truly a grieving father, why had he waited 10 years? Why had he demanded 50 million Nigerian nairas alongside custody? Why had no one seen him search, no report filed, no missing child declaration made? His answers were inconsistent. His demands became clearer. Money mattered to him as much as the child. Perhaps more. And those who once supported him began to doubt. Because love does not wait for profit. Love does not appear only when the cameras are watching. Day after day, the trial dragged on. Witnesses were called. Papers were presented. The couple's lawyers highlighted the adoption process, the medical records, the years of dedication. The man's lawyers hammered on biology, DNA, and the rights of a father. Each session ended with tension. Each day, the couple returned home with heavier hearts. The boy, though shielded, felt the weight of it all. He saw his parents' tears. He heard the whispers. He carried a burden far too heavy for 10-year-old shoulders. One morning, the courtroom was packed tighter than ever. The judge, his voice calm but firm, announced that before any ruling could be made, the child himself must be heard in court. The words struck like thunder. The couple wept. They feared exposing him to the cruelty of the courtroom. The man smirked, confident that the child would be swayed by the weight of blood. The city held its breath. Because now, the decision was no longer in the hands of adults. It would rest in the heart of a child. But what no one knew, not the man, not even the couple, was that there was someone watching. A young woman who had carried a secret for 10 years. A woman who had seen what really happened the night the boy was abandoned. Her truth had the power to shatter the man's lies. But for now, she remained in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to step forward. The story had begun with love, moved into betrayal, and now balanced on the fragile voice of a child. Blood had spoken. DNA had confirmed what science knew. But science does not measure sleepless nights, or healing embraces, or the bond that grows in silence. Science cannot weigh love. Soon the boy will stand before the court. His voice, though small, will carry the weight of truth. And when he speaks, the world will know that not all fathers are made by blood, some are made by love. Stay until the very end, because the next part of this story will break chains, expose lies, and remind us all of what it truly means to be family. The courtroom in Lagos was heavy that morning. No sound of fans, no whispers of the crowd, only the weight of silence, thick and unbearable. The boy, 10 years old, stood at the center of it all. His small hands trembled. His eyes darted between two worlds, one of blood and one of love. Behind him, the rich couple who had raised him for a decade held their breath. Their hearts pounded with a fear they had never known. Before him, the man who claimed him as a son leaned forward with the hunger of triumph. The judge's voice was steady. "Child, speak." And for the first time in this story, everything hung not on lawyers, or DNA, or documents, but on the fragile voice of a boy. He did not cry. He did not shake. He lifted his face, and though his voice was soft, It carried across the room like a prayer whispered to heaven. He spoke of nights when sickness came, and it was his mother's arms that comforted him. He spoke of mornings when fear came, and it was his father's voice that gave him courage. He spoke of laughter in the home, of birthdays celebrated, of love that never left. He turned to the man and said nothing of hate, nothing of anger, only silence. Because to him, this man was not a father. He was a stranger who had appeared when the boy was already whole. And then, with the innocence of truth, the boy said, "I want to stay with them. They are my parents." The courtroom stirred. Some gasped, some wept. The man clenched his jaw. The couple collapsed into tears, not of fear, but of hope restored. The man's lawyers leapt to their feet. They argued that a child could be manipulated, that love did not erase blood, that rights of a father could not be silenced by emotions. And for a moment, the couple trembled. Because though the boy had spoken, the law was still a battlefield where truth could be twisted. But fate had prepared something more. Something stronger than arguments. As the debate raged, a figure rose from the back of the courtroom. A young woman, her voice shaking but firm, asked to speak. The judge allowed her. She stepped forward and the room turned. She told her story. 10 years ago, on that humid night in Lagos, she had been walking home when she saw the man. She saw him leave the infant on the roadside, wrapped in dirty cloth, his cries piercing the night. She had hidden in fear, unable to stop him, but she remembered his face. She had carried the memory in silence until now. Her words struck like thunder. The man shouted in denial. But the woman's testimony was firm. She gave details only a witness could know. The judge listened. The crowd gasped. The couple wept, their worst fear now confirmed. Their son had not been lost, he had been abandoned. And the man who claimed love was nothing more than a deserter chasing wealth. When the gavel finally struck, it was not just the end of a case. It was the end of a storm. The judge ruled that custody would remain with the couple, that the adoption was valid, the love undeniable, and the abandonment proven. The man's lawsuit for 50 million Nigerian nairas was dismissed, his lies exposed. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, some wept. The man was left standing alone, his greed unraveling in the harsh light of truth. And the couple, the man and woman who had waited 20 years for a child, left the courtroom not just as parents-in-law, but as parents in love, vindicated before the world. Back at their mansion, the halls once again echoed with laughter. The boy, still young but already wise beyond his years, carried himself with a new kind of strength. He had chosen. And in his choice, he had reminded the world that family is not always written in blood. It is written in sacrifice, in nights without sleep, in love that never abandons. The couple, scarred but stronger, knew that storms may come again. But they also knew that their bond was unbreakable, that they had faced the harshest test of all, and love had survived. The woman who had testified returned to her life, but her courage remained a symbol that truth, though delayed, always finds its way to the light. And the man who had tried to take advantage of the situation faded into silence, his greed exposed for all to see. This was not just the story of a rich couple in Lagos. It was the story of countless families across the world, families built not by blood, but by love. Families tested by pain, by betrayal, by lies. Families who learn that parenthood is not about biology, but about presence. For 20 years, the couple had waited. For 10 years, they had raised their son. And when the storm came, they fought with everything they had. And in the end, the boy chose them. Not because of money, not because of comfort, but because of love. If you have followed this story to the end, you know by now that life is not fair, but love is stronger than fairness. That blood may speak, but love endures. Subscribe so that you never miss stories like this. Stories that pierce the heart and remind us of what it truly means to be human. And remember this: real parenthood is not in giving life. It is in never abandoning it.